Hello, welcome back to the Harlequins podcast, episode 4. My name is Michael, and I'm here as always with my cousin Will. Will, how are you, mate?
I'm on cloud nine at the minute, mate, after the game that's just happened at the weekend with the Quins and Wasps. So very happy to be here, and we've got some really exciting things to talk about, especially after that performance from the boys.
Yeah, spot on, mate. Those that are donning or listening to us via the YouTube visual that we provide will notice that we're currently wearing our Quins gear, given that we're sort of riding half the back of a big match day win. We're just going to jump in sort of straight away with a bit of chat that we've had sort of throughout the week, really. Been a bit of a roller coaster, mate, hasn't it?
Certainly has. I mean, it's been our first week on the pod. It's been lots of fun. We've had some great chat with some real fans of the club who've got really strong opinions that some we agree with, some we don't, and that's the beauty of being fans. Some really great feedback. We appreciate all the feedback that everybody shared with us. We've taken some on board. Again, like Mike said, what we normally do is release a YouTube version and a podcast version. For those of you watching the YouTube version, we'll see that we've inherited some mics, so hopefully the audio quality will be much better. Some of my favourite feedback is the comparisons that Michael's been getting. I've heard of James Haskell. That definitely can't be for the chat.
But it certainly isn't my rig either.
And then the weirdest one he had is George Ezra. I think that must be the deep voice. It definitely can't be the singing voice. But
it's not the first time it's happened. It certainly isn't my singing. Someone mentioned that it was the sort of floppy nature of my haircut, which again is a sort of slightly more different comparison than I was hoping for. But no, I'll take it, or whatever it is, I'll take it. But yeah, I'm not quite sure on the Hask one. I'm trying to avoid that tag. I mean, like I say, it certainly isn't the work that's gone into my top half. I've been out of the gym a while, as you can probably tell.
I won't make a comment on that. But we've had a lot of fun on the socials as well. We've been engaging with all of you guys and getting involved with the conversations. There's some really interesting chats going on from different parts of the club, as well as just focusing on the men's team. We've had some interesting follows as well. We've had a huge high-profile follow that we're stoked about, aren't we, Mike?
Yeah, big time. And obviously sort of leads us into our next topic. We've had some pretty cool follows, like you say, mate. We've had some real sort of cool interactions over the last week, 10 days, whatever it's been. But a big one today, in the morning of his son starting on the wing against Wasps, was Lewis's dad, Michael, followed us on Twitter this morning, and it clearly inspired a bit of magic in him after a big performance against Wasps. So we touched on the game. Sort of what were your general thoughts after a win?
Yeah, I just hope he didn't see me pick my best 15, excluding him last week on the last episode that we did. I know you're a big fan of Lewis Lyon and obviously had him straight in your 15, and I've got a bit of egg on my face now. So Nathan Earl, next time you get a game, you need to bail me out a little bit.
I felt a little bit bad for you at the time because I was rooting for Lewis, and I know he went through our team, and I didn't mind the selection of Earl, not at all, but I was pretty hot on picking young Lewis, and he certainly repaid my faith. I mean, he was close to man of the match. If he'd have picked that second interception around under the sticks, I think it'd have been tough to not choose him for man of the match. But no, he was class on the day.
Yeah, that's definitely a point I'm keen to make as well. His reading of the game was exceptional, wasn't it? I think you made a good point on WhatsApp whilst we were watching. He's got his old man's head on his shoulders, but obviously got the youth and energy of a modern day rugby player in his legs. So no, really good to watch him and watch him thrive as well.
I'm just going to sort of read my notes now on who I'm picking as big standout performers. I thought Will Evans is just getting better and better and better. He's so good over the ball, and his work rate in defence is superb for a guy who's not one of the biggest forwards in the squad. And I'm trying to think of us as well. Even though he's not one of the most electric players we've got, but Aaron Morris there I thought was unbelievable. In the wake of signing a new deal, he was brilliant under the high ball. Defensively, he was brilliant. And although we, been a couple of rumours about him potentially on his way out of the club, I thought Scott Baldwin's day as well was real quality. I think a couple of little dodgy moments at the line out where he's sort of passing it not strictly straight, but that little tap up his foot to obviously give the ball in for Lewis's first sort of big break in the first half was a really nice touch.
Yeah, I'll echo those. I was speaking to my flatmate who I was watching it with. He used to play for Bedford, and he was there when Aaron Morris was there. And he was saying how he's just a really top bloke as well. And you can see that in what he was saying after re-signing for the club this week. The words he had to share about the club and his experience there were fantastic, actually, when you think about all the culture accusations being made at the minute. So that was good to see. I've got some notes as well. And actually, when the players first ran out onto the pitch, and I'll correct myself on purpose there, they sort of ambled out onto the pitch. I was pretty nervous. I thought the body language was pretty horrendous. They didn't look like they were going to have any intensity at all. But then we started playing the Quins way. First phase ball, fling it out wide, get that break on the winger. It was electric. It was awesome. Quick tap penalties from DC again, which we haven't seen for a long time. That's what made me fall in love with Quins, particularly in that title winning season in 2012. It was all about the energy that he brought to the game.
I won't lie, actually, that first penalty we had, I think it was after a couple of minutes, and DC's got his hands on the ball, and immediately I said take 3 immediately.
100%.
And he went, and I was watching it with my housemate. I went, oh, we're off. And yeah, I mean, it probably just shows the intent that they were trying to play with off the back of a pretty tough week. And I know this is another topic, and it's a guy that we're relentlessly sort of praising and blowing smoke up. But Marcus Smith is, again, just the quality of the man. I mean, today actually reminded me a little bit. I remember when I went to watch the Sarries game at the end of last season, and the Vunipola was at 10. Another, young English fly half in Jacob Umaga, and different gear. Marcus Smith, absolutely different gear. Completely different gear.
Yeah, I thought Marcus was outstanding. He's got a wise head on young shoulders. But I think that's partially down to Danny as well. I think those two controlled the game in tandem, and Danny really allowed Marcus to get front foot ball and play the way he wants to play. I thought he was awesome today, Danny. He really helped Marcus do his thing. What I really enjoyed about Marcus's performance is his ripping of the ball in contact. It reminded me of Farrell when he plays for England, but they often sent a few big boys down his channel, and we'd have one of our big boys in there from the pack come and take him low. And Marcus's job seemed to be to go for the ball and see if he could get a strip. And he got
It's not often I've seen him shirk a tackle, Marcus, as a 10. I don't often see him, missing tackles or shying away from contact. It's certainly something that he's pretty good at for not the biggest sort of physical frame, like you say, the likes of Farrell, who's a big sort of physical 10. He's certainly not in that bracket, but I don't see him missing tackles very often.
No, and you must wonder what they did in training this week, but there was quite a few players that sort of went for that strip. And you think about the value of a turnover from a jackal over the ball, your Will Evans classic example. But actually, there was a few turnovers in the game which were from stripping it in the contact on a double hit. And it's such a crucial part of the game. It gets us that counter-attacking ball. When particularly with the squad we have and the way we play, when you strip a ball and the opposition defence just isn't set up, that's when they're at their most vulnerable, and that's when we're at our strongest. So it's interesting to see that we try to do more of that. I think the key thing to do here is remain calm, and if we'd got pumped in this game, we would have said, oh, well, it is the first game of Billy Millard's interim role. Take it with a pinch of salt. So equally, having just put a pump in on Wasps, we need to put ourselves back in line and say, all right, take it with a pinch of salt. I think the thing that impressed me most today was the attitude. The intensity was there in attack and in defence, more importantly. We turned defence into attack on numerous occasions. I actually was quite impressed with Billy's timing of his substitutions as well. I think it was the 68th minute, just after the bonus point score, where he brought Kerrod, Young and Landajo on. I think they're 3 very sort of established Premiership players, some with international experience, to come on in what was a really fast game. Must have been really fatiguing for players. So I think he picked his timing perfectly for those 3.
The pace of the game was evident, wasn't it? I mean, I know that Austin Healey said it on commentary, but it certainly paid dividends. I mean, getting guys off the bench at really crucial times, I thought was definitely important, because it was intense out there. It was hard. It was fast, and it's tough to play that for 80 minutes. So for sure, I quite like Landajo, however you pronounce it. When he came on, I thought he was a bit quicker than he usually is. He played with a bit more pace, but he controls the game nicely when he comes on. His kicking game's not bad as well. But no, I enjoyed it, mate. It was good. I think that's probably where we'll leave the wrap up of the game for now, because I think we could rattle on about what a great performance it was. I mean, putting 40 points and a bonus point up against a team that are one spot above us in the league is massive in the context of our season, especially off the back of a pretty tough week. Speaking of things that are going on within the club, it's obviously been come to the fore that we're going to go through this guy called Owen Eastwood, who's a culture consultant. He's worked with a lot of big sporting organisations. I'm just reading a couple here. He's been with Gareth Southgate's England, South African Cricket, British Olympic Association, Command Group of NATO, obviously in and out of sport. But culture is a really easy word to throw around in professional sport and in any sort of walk of life. It's a really easy thing to just say that we're building culture and throwing all those buzzwords out there. I'm just sort of wondering what your take on it is. Obviously, you've had a bit of training with in a work capacity. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is something I'm really excited to talk about, actually, because I think I've taken quite a lot away from it, both professionally but mainly personally. This is some training that was rolled out for the company that I work for, and I've taken quite a lot of it on board. And I'll try and share some bits with you in a consumable way now. I imagine it's what Owen Eastwood is going to try and do with the club over the next few weeks or months, or however long he's going to be with us. I think just one last point on that Wasps game, and I guess it's loosely connected to culture, is the attitude that we showed and the resilience and the fact that we kicked for the corner when the clock was red and went and got that penalty try. Well, that was outstanding. But
it would have been easy just to knock the ball out and take the win, but going for the another try towards the end, that was quite important, I think.
Absolutely, yeah, and a good amount of camaraderie as well. So I've just taken part in CCI training with work, which is an acronym for creating a culture of inclusion. It touches on diversity, inclusion, lots of different modules such as microaggressions and unconscious bias, all things that play a role in creating that culture. And these are things that I imagine Owen Eastwood's going to be going into the club and sort of reviewing and studying, and then looking to correct or educate where relevant. Because I think that's the important part about culture. It's always education. Nobody's perfect. Everyone's got different backgrounds and different educations. And I think what he's going to try and do is try and make people more understanding of each other and create an environment of trust. Yeah. So some of the things I took from that, diversity is the quality of different cultures. So that can be from race to gender to sexuality to age to social class, etc. There's so many different things that create diversity. Inclusion is sort of accepting people of different diversities into your environment. It's all about equality. It's not just giving people a seat at the table, but letting them feel comfortable being their authentic selves and feeling empowered to share their voice of opinion. I think that's an important part. I think you read things at the club where there's the hierarchy, and actually diversity and inclusion doesn't have to be about ethnicity or sexuality or your gender. It can actually just be your experience and your age. You think about the young players at the club, do they get as much of a voice as they perhaps deserve? Everyone deserves an equal voice. So I think that's an interesting point. You obviously mentioned Owen Eastwood and his outstanding CV. It'd be really interesting to see how he applies that to a modern day environment in a rugby club, particularly in a pandemic where there's other challenges which he probably hasn't come across before, and other considerations to make. But on this culture point, there are a few modules that stuck out to me in particular. The first one was unconscious bias. Everybody has unconscious bias because everybody has a conscience. So there's one quote I want to share with you that stuck with me. It's, you're not responsible for your first thought, but you are responsible for your first action. So everybody's got unconscious bias. You will automatically have an opinion, not an opinion, but a first thought about a person before actually meeting them. That's fine. You're not necessarily responsible for that, but how you act upon that, you are responsible for. So that's a good quote that I took away from it. Another module that stuck out to me was microaggressions. And this is something that people listening will realize with colleagues they have at work, with their family, friendship groups. It exists everywhere, but microaggressions are actions such as words, body language, attitudes, which are indirect expressions of either racism, sexism, ageism, ableism in some cases, etc. The list goes on. So it doesn't have to be related to demographic criteria either. It could be somebody's having family issues, and because of that, you assume they're not as mentally tuned in as another player could be. Or it could be as simple as they have a different football team to you, they support a different football team, and for that reason you value their opinion less. So there are loads of different microaggressions that need to be considered. It happens in every single team. It will happen in every single workplace as well. And I've actually got another example here from Matthew Syed. So if you don't know Matthew Syed, he was an English table tennis player professionally. He's now an author, really, really smart guy, speaks incredibly well. And he had a little anecdote or an example of what makes a successful team where there's cognitive diversity. So you've got 2 rooms. Both rooms have 10 people in there. The first room has a monoculture. So you've got people in the same age bracket, the same gender, they're from the same geographical area, same ethnicity, same sexuality. The second room is more diverse. You've got a variety of ages, a variety of genders, variety of geographical backgrounds, a variety of ethnicities, and a variety of sexualities, etc. It's diverse. What room do you think will create the best results?
I'm not sure if I know the right answer, but I'd imagine,
It's a rhetorical question.
I'd imagine, the room with more to offer rather than that monoculture.
100%. It's simple when you think about it that way. The diverse room, because you're going to come up with 10 different ideas. That monoculture room is going to come up with one idea because everybody's had the same experience. That diverse room with 10 different experiences in it is going to come up with 10 different ideas. I know which room I'd rather work in, particularly when you're at a club like Quins and you just can't have enough ideas in terms of how to play the game and play exciting rugby. So, yeah, it'll be fascinating to see what Owen Eastwood comes in and does with the club. I expect there'll be quite a bit of change because I think this training has really helped our development at my workplace. And I think it's something that should be rolled out everywhere. And it'll be interesting to see what comes off the back of it with the club.
I think it's huge. I mean, I was thinking about this sort of buzzword. I think is a quite a good way to describe it, of culture and creating a culture, especially within a sports club. And so I was 18, 19. I was living in Australia playing hockey, and I was living in Melbourne, and I got introduced to Aussie rules, and I became a fan of the Richmond Tigers. And it reminded me a little bit of the crossroads that Quins are at, sort of currently. Big sort of city club, very close to the home of sport in a sort of stadium sense, being next to the MCG and being next to Twickenham. Huge fan base, hugely loyal fan base, very diverse fan base. And sort of at the point of where the club was at, they'd been poor for a number of years, having probably underachieved, which I think is what Quins are at now. And there was a point where they finished outside the sort of top half of the table, which for a club like Richmond's size at the time was a pretty poor effort. And they had an independent club review, much like is what's going to happen with Owen Eastwood coming in and the sort of general work that he's going to be doing. And they were speaking about how they can create a culture, not just winning, but about not just winning games on the field, but talking to the top person in the club being just as important as the person switching the lights off at the end of the day. And they went through this big independent review, and I won't go too much into it, but at the end of the sort of general point of it is that they put trust in certain people to do the job without ripping it up head to toe and restarting again. Whether that happens at Quins or not, I'm not sure, but it just sort of reminded me of the sort of similarities of where that's going. And 4 years later, Richmond have won 3 premierships in 4 years, and obviously I get a lot of stick from my Aussie mates about jumping on a bandwagon. But I was there for the one tough year that I was a fan pre actually them getting some silverware. And actually, I really enjoy sort of listening to all that kind of stuff you've just been talking about. I mean, specifically in my workplace, we get staff of all ages, many different interests, many different diversities, especially living in the area that I'm at, in a city like London, we're hugely sort of diverse culturally. And, that's really cool. And I think that's incredibly important, not just in today's, culture and civilization, but in a sporting sense as well. I think that's a really cool thing to touch on.
Yeah, 100%. And I think what's exciting about our club is obviously the future of it now. And we talk about cultures and has it actually changed since we won the Premiership in 2012, which I think is a question mark. And if it hasn't changed in that amount of time, then obviously there will be an issue because so much in the world does change. I think I'm not qualified to talk on it, but I think what I would do is almost have a changing of the guard. I think now is the time to put our faith in our younger players and make them the future of the club and the spine. In the same way that we had Hugo and Nick Evans and Danny and Joe and Robbo and Brownie as our spine of our team for all those years, I think now it's time to shift that on and have Marcus and March and Dombrandt and Murley, etc. Louis Liner on the wing now. It's like now is the time for that changing of the guard. We've got our new spine, and with that will come a new culture. And I think it's time that we accept that and embrace it. And actually, I've seen some really great videos actually of rugby clubs and other sports celebrating after wins, and you don't really see this so much of that from Quins. You think about the FA Cups and the upsets, and you see players singing Adele in the changing room afterwards. And if you're watching the YouTube version, I'm going to put a screenshot of the Brumbies in the changing room after a game where they went viral for their Justin Bieber take of Eeny Meeny. Which I absolutely loved. I thought it was awesome. So you don't see too much of that from our club, and I wonder if that's about to change.
I do like Adele as well. I know that Joe Marler does a good Adele. I won't give you my impression now, but George Ezra is probably slightly closer than Adele. And I think that's a really good point. 10 years ago, probably we did find that crop of Brown, Monia, Kerr, Marler, Rob Shaw, without putting them up on a shelf just for now, but they can be hugely valuable to the likes of Marcus and Joe Marchant, Don Brandt, those sort of players. That's the future of our club moving forward, isn't it? And I think you're right. Whether it's a top to toe reshuffle or just putting a bit more trust in those guys to be the next sort of 3 or 4 years, the cornerstone of what we're about as a side. That's going to be really interesting to see what happens in the next sort of few weeks, I suppose.
Totally, yeah. And I think you've got to understand as a player that your role changes throughout the years of your career. And their role for me has changed now. That it's almost about a nurturing role. There's still a job to do, and they're very good at it. But it's now about bringing through the next generation. So, but on that topic of sort of being nostalgic and looking back at our previous spine and changing the guard, I've actually got a question for you. It's twofold. Question one: if you could go back and rewatch any Quins game live without knowing the result and be at the ground as if it's happening for the first time, at the age you're at now, what game would you choose and why?
Holy hell.
It's a tough one.
It's probably really easy to say the final in 2012. That's probably quite an easy one to sort of go straight to. I'm going to try and think slightly further afield than that. Again, probably a really easy one to say. Stad at home, drop goal Nev. That's another really easy one. I think the next one for me that springs to mind slightly further afield, 2011 Toulouse European Cup. Big away day, yeah. Like we spoke about this in sort of episode 1, and I've not done a real big away day of the club yet. If I could go and spend a weekend in the south of France watching us beat Toulouse in the European Cup, I think that'd top the tree for me. I think that'd be pretty cool.
So I'll flip that on its head. Obviously, I'm the one that does more of the away days, and you do the home games. My answer is actually a home game. So I was at the Premiership final in 2012. Obviously, the question was at the age you're at now. I'm sure I'd consume a lot more beer at this age. It'd be a lot more fun. But I wouldn't choose that one. The one I would choose would be the Nick Evans drop goal against Stad at home. That just gives me sort of 03 energy. Just imagine being in that stand behind the post as it comes sailing through. You erupt and sort of rise to your feet. Yeah, that's the one I'd choose. And then the second question, which is linked, is any sport. Same question, but for any sport. If you could watch any sports game from history live at the ground at the age you're at now, what game would you choose?
Wow. I was having a conversation similar to this. Me and my mates were saying a couple of weeks ago that if you won the lottery tomorrow, what would you do? And we all said we'd just spend like a year traveling around the world, going to every major sporting event you could possibly fit in. Wow, any major one? Easy to say Cricket World Cup final.
Yes.
Pretty unbelievable. Again, Stokes, Headingley, not bad. I'm just
not bad.
Well,
not bad.
Actually, the Stokes at Headingley game, I was actually playing in a 6-a-side tournament down in Winchester with a few of my mates. August bank holiday, I think it was. Hell of a day, like brilliant day, and we were having a lot of fun throughout the day. And somebody had to sort of run over and tell us to stop playing because we had to quickly all gather around a few phones in the
100%.
Yeah, we
had to do that.
I think I was fielding on the boundary somewhere, sort of not really paying attention. It was scorching hot, and I just saw all this commotion going on. And suddenly we're running over to the clubhouse, and he was on about 80 at the time, and we watched it start to finish from then on. And yeah, that was pretty special. I think if I had to go anything else, sort of already briefly touched on it, but I've really fallen in love with my Aussie rules over the last 4 or 5 years. I would have liked to have done Richmond, Adelaide, 2017 grand final. I was actually very, very lucky. I flew to Melbourne in 2019 for the final. I went to Melbourne for the weekend, and that was an unbelievable day. Probably the best I've had in sport, but it was a very, very one-sided game. I'd like to have gone to the 2017 final, and it was a bit closer for a little bit longer. But yeah, 100 or so thousand people packed into an MCG is pretty special.
Incredible. Yeah, incredible. All about that turnout, isn't it? Funny, you mentioned the one I would do. I would 100% do Stokes at Headingley, 135 not out. There's a couple of reasons to it. It's a full day. The tension builds across the day.
Yeah,
Jack Leach's role will forever be applauded. I also went to university in Leeds, so it holds a lot of fond memories for me. So I can
you
imagine
did, didn't you?
quite a night out. But I actually remember that I was shopping with my ex-girlfriend in Oxford Street, and I was in the changing room watching it on my phone, watching the last over. And she was like, "What's taking so long?" I was like, "Oh, they're really tight. I can't get these jeans off." Stokesy. So no, I'd love to have been there for that. I've got a few friends that were there, and I honestly think it would be one of those things you never forget.
I think it's a quality shout, having been there for the whole day, the build up, and then Pat Cummins, short, wide, long up outside off stump that's crunched for 4. Wow.
Beautiful.
Anyway, mate, I think that's a pretty good spot for us to wrap up. We've obviously spoken about a lot there, and some really interesting topics across the sort of half an hour or so that we'll be talking for. But no, obviously off the back of a really good win, huge for us in the context of the season, some really cool chat. And we'll be on to episode 5, hopefully in the next few days. But Will, from me and you now, we'll leave it there, and good to chat, mate, and we'll talk soon.
Until next time.
Take it easy, people.